Okay, today's Q&A is about shellac. And the question is that someone said that they don't eat certain candies because they're coated with something that's made from a bug. And the question is, well, if that's true that there's something made from a bug on this, how could it be that these candies would be certified kosher? If it has bugs in it, we know bugs are not kosher. So how could it be that it's kosher, or at least we all think it's kosher, yet it has bugs on it? So to understand this, we have to know like this. Lots of candies and fruits even and pills and certain other foods are coated with something called shellac, which is also known as confectioner's glaze or resinous glaze. And this shellac coating gives them a glossy coating to them, makes it shiny, and it also seals moisture into the food. It's made from a secretion from millions of these teeny little insects, which are pronounced, I hope I pronounce this right, called Shellac. These little insects, they live on a certain type of tree in the Far East. And what happens is the insects draw sap from a tree, convert it in their bodies into whatever, and secrete it onto the tree. And then it dries on contact with the tree. And this secretion is what we call shellac. Now, the insects are obviously usher. You can't eat insects. And there's a general rule that the yotze from something that's usher, the excretion of something that's not kosher is also not kosher. So that at first glance you would say is, well, then the shellac should be not kosher. The shellac is excreted by a non-kosher insect, then the shellac should be not kosher. However, in Igros Moshe, he says like this: the shellac becomes rock hard as soon as it gets onto the tree, and it's not a food item. I mean, you use it for coating furniture also. It's not edible at all. So he says that if the shellac had been made from something that was inherently forbidden, then we would say that while it's inedible, it's temporarily mutter, you're allowed to eat it, but as soon as it becomes edible again, it would become usher. But since the shellac is a yotze, it's not the actual insect itself, it's just a secretion of the insect. The halacha is that when you have a yotze, which is inedible, a secretion which is inedible, instead of calling it a yotze, we have a different name for it. We call it a pirsha, which means like excrement. And that is permanently and completely permitted. And even if it becomes edible at some later point, it stays mutter anyhow. Therefore, the shellac, which is an excretion of the forbidden insect, is permitted, even though if we had gelatin made from non-kosher bones or carmine made from crushing up these cochineal beetles, they would be not kosher, because the gelatin and the carmine are made from an actual forbidden item, which is temporarily not edible, but as soon as they become edible, then they become usher. As opposed to the shellac, which is only a yotze, it's only an excretion from the inedible item, and therefore, if it was not edible when it was excreted, it remains mutter even if it becomes edible later on. Now, that's what Rav Moshe says. But Rabbi Yashiv had a question on this, and he said like this. He says, it's true that pirsha is mutter. That's correct. The question is whether that leniency, this idea that we should say that something that's not edible is treated as pirsha, that makes sense by animals and fish and other things like that, where the item itself, that's the forbidden item that secreted it, was itself edible. Therefore, we say well, the secretion is not edible, so it has a lower status. But in our case, the insects themselves are themselves inedible, so they don't have a pleasant taste to them. So they're also anyhow. So the fact that the thing is inedible shouldn't make a difference. We shouldn't say, well, since it's inedible, that makes it a lower status called pirsha, because the thing it came from is also not edible. So Rabbi Yashiv therefore holds that a person should be machmir and should not eat this item. And those who are machmir follow that approach and say if it's a food that have shellac coating on them, they won't eat them. They consider them to be not kosher. In contrast, the Nechon Hashkachas in the United States follow the ruling of Rav Moshe, and they consider shellac to be acceptable for kosher products. And in fact, most American consumers follow along with that. But those who are machmir, as I mentioned, are following the stricter approach to not treat this as pirsha.